When you walk into a music store and see a glossy, cheap-look Strat for under $200, the temptation is real. I've bought a handful of those budget copies, and each time the excitement fizzles out when the pickup buzzes, the tremolo won't stay in tune, and the neck feels like a slab of plywood. That regret is why I wanted to see if stepping up to an American-made instrument could actually be a smarter move instead of just another disappointment in disguise. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The Fender American Ultra 2 Stratocaster in Noble Blue is the kind of guitar that sits in the "I'm serious about my tone but I don't want to compromise on playability" corner of the market. It's not a vintage recreation, and it's not a bargain bin replica. It's a modern take on the classic Strat, built in the US, with a few updates that only someone who has spent time with a bunch of Strat variations could appreciate. If you've ever tried a low-cost Strat and found the action either too high or too low, the tremolo too loose or too stiff, you'll recognize the difference right away. First off, let's talk about the wood. The body is Alder, which is the same material you find on the iconic 1950s and 60s models, but Fender has refined the grain selection for a tighter resonance. In a live gig setting, that means you get a balanced low-end punch without the muddiness that cheaper laminated bodies can introduce. I've used this guitar for everything from clean, chorus-laden rhythm parts in a small coffeehouse setting to a slightly overdriven solo on a mid-size stage, and the Alder core kept the notes distinct, even when the PA was pushing the mids. The neck is maple with an Ebony Fingerboard A pairing that feels intentional rather than marketing fluff. Ebony is noticeably smoother than the more common rosewood, and if you spend any time bending strings or executing fast scale runs, that slick surface reduces friction. On my last recording session, I was tracking a blues solo at 140 BPM, and the fingerboard let my hand glide without the usual catch that can happen on a rougher surface. The trade-off, though, is that Ebony can show wear faster if you're aggressive with your picking. In a few months of regular gigging, I started to see light wear around the 12th fret, which is something to consider if you plan to keep the instrument pristine for years. Now, the pickups. Fender calls them Ultra 2 single coils, and they're not just rebranded versions of the classic Strat voices. The three pickups sit under the classic pickup selector, but they've been wound with a lower DC resistance, giving you a bit more clarity and less background hum. In practice, that translates to a tighter high end when you dial in the bridge pickup for a searing lead tone. I tried them with a standard Fender amp, a boutique overdrive pedal, and even a modern digital modeling rig. Across the board, the signal stayed clean enough to layer a reverb without the typical single-coil hiss that cheap models struggle with. If you're a player who layers multiple tracks and cares about that pristine separation, you'll notice the difference. The Synchronized tremolo is another area where the Ultra 2 steps away from the budget crowd. Cheap Strat knockoffs often use low-quality springs that either lose tension after a few uses or never return fully, leaving you out of tune. Fender's tremolo on this model includes a set of stainless steel springs and a roller nut that reduces friction. I pushed the whammy bar through a full dive bomb on a live song, and the return was smooth. The guitar stayed within a half step of its original tuning after the performance. That said, the system isn't completely maintenance-free. If you're a gigging musician who swaps strings daily, you'll want to check the spring tension and perhaps install a few extra lock-in nuts if you're into aggressive whammy tricks. It's a small price of ownership, but it's worth noting for those who dread constant setups. Aesthetic-wise, the Noble Blue finish is a subtle nod to the classic Sunburst but with a modern twist. It catches the stage lights without looking gaudy, and the lacquer feels thick enough to protect the body from the inevitable bumps of touring. The finish also adds a tiny bit of weight, something I felt when I first lifted the guitar off the stand. It's not a heavy instrument, but you'll notice a difference if you're used to a featherlight practice model. For players who sit on the edge of fatigue during long rehearsals, that extra half kilogram may be a factor. Who should buy this? If you're an intermediate to professional guitarist who has outgrown entry-level Strats, or if you're a session player looking for a reliable, versatile workhorse that can switch from clean jazz chords to biting rock leads without changing guitars, the Ultra 2 is a logical upgrade. It also makes sense for collectors who appreciate a fresh, high-quality colorway that isn't overproduced.